Okay, hello. I'm here with the magnificent Brian David Bruns, and we are catching up. I spoke to you last in December, I think, around then. And how's life taken off for you in those few months since?
It has been a crazy couple of months. It's been a wonderful, crazy couple of months, though. I can't complain. Been very busy. The new book is out. The old book is winning some new awards, so things are keeping me on my toes.
Sure. So how have things been? Because last time I spoke to you, you were hoping to get your book out by the anniversary of the Titanic, and you had all that going on. How has those have it been? Has it been quite smooth since then getting your book out, or was there a lot of rush?
Well, there was a lot of rush, but that's okay. It's you kind of need that, you know. There's good and bad when you have a personal relationship with your publisher. They don't tend to push you as much as they would if they were a completely third party. So you have to push yourself. So you have to make those goals, and if they're tough, great. It keeps me off the couch, right? Because I work at home.
Sure. And how's your schedule been? Because I know you've been traveling a lot. How much of your day or week would be scheduled to um, finishing this book, and how have things been with all the TV stuff and all of that going on? How's that been, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, that's been interesting. The nice thing about being a writer is that it's very similar to being an artist in that you let the creative juices kind of overflow you, and then you'll just lock yourself in a room and work constantly for several days, only coming out to eat or something like that, and then you just get totally exhausted, and you need to do something totally different to free your mind up. So it works out fairly well when you have these surprise things, like when I went to New York to be interviewed by ABC's 2020. That came up out of nowhere, and it was perfect because I was on the edge of burnout, and you know what? A couple of days, great. Just get me out of the office, something new, freshen me up.
Cool. Actually, that'd be great to cover kind of how you become a writer and all of that stuff later. But actually, yeah, we come to a nice point. How has the beginning of the year been for you? Because I know that was the ABC interview a result of what happened with Acosta?
It was it's it says a lot about the media in that I don't know. It was about 3 days after the accident. There were still some 24 people missing, and I got a call from one of the producers at ABC, and they're like, I would like to put this show together, but I just don't know if there's going to be enough interest by next Friday, which is when the show would air. And I'm like, there's 24 people probably dead, and it's 3 days old. And she's like, yeah, 3 days is 3 days, man. And I'm like, okay. We chatted for about 45 minutes, and she's like, look, can I just call you back tomorrow and see if I can, get the powers that be interested in doing this? Because honestly, everybody's slamming the cruise industry, and we want to have somebody who has a positive take on it. We don't want to just air this like everybody else, all the dirty laundry, jump on the bandwagon. And the next day they called and they said, can you be on a plane this afternoon? Okay, apparently she convinced her higher-ups.
How did they track you down?
They tracked me down. She found it because of a news release for my book signing cruise, which is coming up. Actually, we postponed it till next February. We're going to be doing a 7-day book signing cruise.
Oh, cool.
So she
Yeah,
found it
I
that
wanted I
way.
wanted to cover that later as well. That'd be so cool. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, carry on. Yeah, so she got in contact with you, and did she contact many other people, or were you the first and only one she went to and interviewed?
She wanted to get as many different people as she could. I was the only writer that she spoke with. She's from New York, of course, and she happened to have access to two different ladies that lived in New York that had been on the cruise lines. Both of those were entertainers, and that worked out well for her because she was burning the midnight oil, and of course it's New York. They never sleep, right?
Hmm.
So she managed to get 3 people for this little segment. Fortunately, she featured me most of the time because I was worried about being upstaged.
Have you done a TV interview before about your books before and stuff?
No, actually, I've been on TV a million times on the ships. It's the closed circuit stuff, and I've been in front of a live audience most of my career. But this is the first time I was in like a major studio,
Oh
and
wow!
it was an
How was it?
amazing experience.
How was it? Was it what you expected it to be? Did it last longer, or did it just fly by?
It went fast. It was not at all what I expected it to be. It turns out that ABC has, I'm sure they all do, have lots of satellite studios for, whatever, overflow, B-film, whatever. And Deborah Roberts, who's one of the hosts of ABC's 2020, she met with me at this I don't know, it was like an old warehouse that had been converted into a studio. And it was about 2 blocks off of Broadway. And it was very informal because that particular building was owned by, I can't remember where he was from, Middle Eastern gentleman. But he was kind of farming it out to ABC. So they had a kitchenette there, and he was baking cookies for everybody. And between interviews, Deborah was, grabbing cookies, and we were all it was really informal.
Wow. How? Because I know that it. Because I think I saw the full version or whatever went out. I think that was about 5 or 10 minutes long, wasn't it? How long was the whole interview?
The whole interview, they probably chatted with me for about 15 minutes. And they told me the camera was running for about 5 of those minutes, but I know how it works. So, there were many times they had me sit down to make sure the lighting's right. And finally they're like, here, just have a seat and get to know Deborah. And so she's just asking me questions. I knew the camera was rolling. They do that. We all do that. But fortunately, I was very relaxed because you couldn't even see the camera. They had it way, way in the back corner, and they zoom in on you. So it was no big deal. There was no nerves or anything like that.
Oh no, that's so cool. And how did you? How did did you watch all of the segments, and how do you feel that they reflected the cruise industry and your part in it? Do you feel that they portrayed you fairly, and the whole industry, being from an inside point of view, is yours?
I do think overall they portrayed it well. There's no question that they were expected to glamorize a lot of the negativity that was going on with the Costa and the Concordia. And, the more you learn about the captain of the Costa Concordia, it's just a comedy of errors. And the guy is so laughable. He must have done 20 things wrong. The entire checklist of what you're supposed to do, he failed every single one. So they deserve to put that in the spotlight. I mean, the guy completely dropped the ball. But then they started talking a lot about the negative stuff that nobody talks about, like people disappearing from ships or falling overboard or fights on board. And I think they over-dramatized that. But, that having been said, they kind of came back around at the end to point out that these things are the very few exceptions, and nobody cares. That's why they don't make a lot of media attention, because nobody cares. When you have 15 million cruisers annually and 2 of them disappear a year, it's safer than walking across the street.
Yeah, no, and I really like your spin on that. How when you went on the interview, you're like, I still believe in the industry and everything that I stand for, which actually brings me on what I wanted to cover next. The cruise industry at the moment. What was your reaction when you first saw the Costa on the news and go down, and how was people that you knew in the industry? How did everyone react?
Yeah, everybody was shocked that something so bad had happened. That being said, I have a number of friends, including my wife, that has worked on Costa, and they tend to be fast and loose compared to every other cruise line I've ever heard of. I don't want to stereotype, but I'm going to. Please keep in mind what I'm saying is a stereotype. But the Italians are not nearly as rules and safety oriented as say, I mean, the British, there's no way in hell any of that would have happened on a ship with a British captain or a Dutch captain or a Norwegian captain. No way. But it was an Italian captain, and the person who should have taken over, the chief officer, was too busy covering the captain's ass. And it's very obvious if you read what happened and you know the details and you know how it works. He was just really trying to cover up everything. And if they had followed procedure, nobody would have been hurt. They had hours and hours and hours to evacuate the ship. It was right next to the shore. But they didn't evacuate because they refused to admit they made a mistake. They refused to call abandoned ship. The crew members knew what to do. The crew members absolutely were trained on how to handle an abandoned ship, but they are not allowed to do anything until the captain or the XO says abandoned ship, and neither one of them would do it.
Wow.
So, 3 hours later, the ship was at like a 45-degree list, and the XO and the captain were both busy saying, no, we just had an engine failure, and it's just the power went out. Everything's fine. The ship's at 45-degree angle at that point, so it was just ludicrous.
So you can almost unequivocally say that it was down to the people running it as opposed to the ship or one of those things which happens.
It was absolutely 100% the fault of the captain and the XO.
Wow. It's really interesting. And did you find that a lot of people were, as soon as this hit, a lot of people were turning to you? Because my instinct was to just go on your Facebook and see what your comments were, because you're the closest thing I have to an insider on the cruise industry.
Yeah, I was very, very busy fielding interview requests, and there are a lot of nasty journalists out there trying to get some real dirt and asking leading questions and trying to, lure some nasty stuff out of me. So it was really hard to give my honest opinion, because most people were not interested in my honest opinion. It was more like, hey, we smell blood in the water, let's go.
Wow. Which kind of brings me on to your experience within, because I remember reading, I think it was your second book, that you had such vigorous training on Carnival. Do you find that Carnival, is Carnival the only one you've worked for?
I've worked on, I lost track, 5 or 6 different cruise lines.
Oh, wow. And how do they differ in terms of how, behind the scenes, crew, safety, and the whole ship life? Do you find that it's the same wherever you go, or do they all run very differently?
It is very much the same, and it's regulated by the International Maritime Law. So which is another thing that the captain of the Costa was breaking, I might add. But they all are so good. I cannot emphasize that enough. And in my second book, Ship for Brains, I even detail some of the things that they made us do on, for example, the Royal Caribbean ships. I mean, we had to get in the pool with the life rafts, the inflatable ones, and flip them over if they pop up, on the wrong side. And we have to get in there and do all kinds of stuff. And when I was on Carnival, we would have to do mandatory lifeboat lowering and all that stuff. I mean, we're prepped. We're ready.
Yeah, no, I remember I had a flash of you with the Filipinos, or trying to squish in the boat. And I think you hurt your knee or your something. Did you crack something there?
Yeah, I cracked my knee really bad on that. And, it really bothered me because I'm a runner. And that was the only way I could stay in shape. And so I put on a lot of weight when I was on that ship in the beginning because I couldn't run.
Oh, wow. And then, since then, there have either been an increased interest in it, so it's been reported, or it's just been, in inverted commas, bad luck. But another Costa cruise was affected. The Azamara, there was a fire, and that got they lost power for quite a while. What happened with all those little things? Was it just a kind of run of bad luck, or is it just that no one paid attention before, so all these were reported and there was more focus on them?
Well, there was more focus on such things. However, every couple of years, you're going to hear of a fire on a cruise ship that knocks out the power. The same thing happened to Carnival Cruise Line's ship, I believe, last year for about a week. So that does happen. The fact that it was Costa Cruise Lines and it was a week after the disaster with the Concordia, and it just happened by pure bad luck to be in one of the few pirate-infested waters of the world. It just, I mean, those poor shareholders.
And do you think that's a Costa thing that again kind of came down to bad whatever, or is
I
it kind
don't
of
know about the
accounting line?
Azaria or Azamara or whichever it was. I forgot the name. I didn't really follow up on that one because I was pretty busy at that time. But I got the impression from what I read and what I've heard that it was just, pardon the expression, a routine fire.
Wow. So, have you been keeping an eye on the cruise industry or people who are working in them? How has all of this affected? Because I've read in the news, and actually I've seen it's been reflected in the prices of cruises that they've been hit. I would have thought quite badly, but again, I don't know that. Do you know anything about how it's been since?
It has not affected the cruise industry as much as everybody thought it would. There was, of course, this initial panic within the first few days of the Concordia sinking, but the reality is that cruisers know. They know better. And most cruisers are repeat cruisers. A big chunk of the people that cruise every year cruised last year or the year before. And they're not intimidated by this sort of sensationalism because they know the stats.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I kept on reading that it was kind of more first timers, whereas I'm like, well, it's a benefit for me because I have seen some prices drop quite tremendously. I think Europe was more hit than kind of
Yes,
North
yes.
America and stuff. But yeah, I know that the one was leaving from Southampton in the UK, and that was literally half price. And I'm like, if I had a bit more money and more days off, then I'd be on that like a
Right.
shot because they're really
It's about
cheap.
time off, yeah, really.
It is really cheap. So how have things been watching all of this unfold in the media and knowing people in it? Has it been like, whoa, it's quite a big deal, or have you been like, it's just one of those things that just happens? What's your
Yeah,
big view on it
it's just
overall?
one of those things that just happens. It hasn't really affected anybody. I don't know anybody that's on Costa Cruise Lines now, so I can't speak to that end. But everybody else, they're like, whatever, it happens. So obviously, it was a tragedy, but it was such an extreme, bizarre case that it's kind of hard to take it seriously. I mean, the captain, uh, claims he fell into a lifeboat, and when he was trying to help a little old lady in, which is why he abandoned the ship without, before the passengers did. It's ludicrous. I mean, wow, when they started calling him Chicken of the Sea, I think that sums it up perfectly.
Quite like that. Okay, cool. So let's move on to your book, which has just been released. I've read about the first quarter, and it is fantastic. How has that been for you, working on it, and compared to your first two books? What was the experience like?
It was a radically different experience for me because I wrote this third book as a full-time writer, whereas the first two I had a part-time job. And it completely changes everything when you can devote every loving moment into crafting the story better. And the first two books, um, actually all three books are taken from my notes. I have a huge diary, but the beauty of the third book is it gave me a chance to tell the story better. So it doesn't read like a diary, whereas you could argue the first two do. So I really, hopefully, I really think I've blossomed as a writer in the last year, and the early reviews of the book seem to reflect that.
That's so cool. So for someone who hasn't read the book or who hasn't come across any of your books, can you just talk about the timeline and the development from book one to book two to book three to any other future books that you might have coming?
Sure, sure. Well, the beauty of book 3 is that it is simultaneously a sequel and a prequel to the other ones. And so I'll explain that in a moment. But the first book, Cruise Confidential, was about my first year working on cruise ships as a waiter on Carnival Cruise Lines. And, I was the only American to have survived in that job in their 30-year history without quitting or switching to a different department. And that applies to pretty much any first worlder. It's because it's a brutal sweatshop conditions, and it's not at all what you would think it's like. So any images that you have about working on a cruise ship, if it's influenced by the Love Boat in any way, shape, or form, it is not like that. So that's what the first book was about. The reason I went to sea was also somewhat included in that, which was I was only putting up with it because I wanted to be with my girlfriend who worked on the ships. And if she had not been the reason, I would have been gone too. And the second book continues the story of me trying to hook up with her because it's very tough on the cruise ships to lead a family life, I guess you could say. And the second book is much more comedic, I think, than the first book, and it's a much smaller time frame. It's when I switched from working in the restaurants to becoming an art auctioneer, which seemed to be the only way I could stay on the cruise ships in my quest for Bianca, who is my girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And that one, it evolved also a little bit differently because it looked like we were going to have a comedy TV series. Sitcom was in the works. It went all the way up to the very top, and finally at the last minute got ixnayed. But we had an Emmy-winning writer from Arrested Development. His name was Chuck Martin, was working on the pilots and all that. And so the second book was really trying to go down the comedy direction. And really, there is nothing more comedic than being an art auctioneer at sea. It is such a bizarre line of work. And the people you work with, you're a rock star on board, and you live in guest cabins. And the stress and the alcohol and, it's the rock star thing, it leads to some very strange situations and to some very strange people. So that's what the second book was about. So the third book, which is just now being released, this is called Unsinkable Mr. Brown. And it's a prequel and a sequel at the same time. And the reason I say that is because book 3 is all about Bianca. Everybody wanted to know, how did I meet her, and why was she so amazing that I would put up with all this crap? And I wanted to show that to people, because when I met Bianca, we had a whirlwind, multi-continent romance. And it's all true, and it's not exactly the kind of thing that everybody, experiences. So I met her for like 2-3 days, and then she invited me to Romania. I'm like, okay, she's from Romania. So I went there, and I lived with her for a couple of months, and we went off to kind of do a honeymoon in Egypt, and just this big whirlwind romance. And finally she's like, well, I have to go back to the ships. That's where I work. And I didn't meet her on the ships. I'm like, okay, so this is what led me to the ships. So I explain all that, and I really have a good chance to show people the amazing travels that we did, just how amazingly in love we were at the time, and before the ships. And then the second half of the book continues the storyline where Ship for Brains left off, and I can't say it wraps everything up. It does explain the whole Bianca trajectory. But I do have one more book in the works that'll probably come out late next year.
Oh, cool. Are you able to speak anything about that, or are you keeping that completely under wraps?
No, I can tell you a little bit about it. It's my last year at sea was in the Mediterranean. I spent a whole year there, and it was the most amazing experience of all my cruise years. We were on a tiny ship. It was called the Windsurf, and I don't even remember how big it was. It was so tiny. It was the world's largest sailing vessel, but it's compared to the big ships, it's tiny, tiny, tiny. So we got into all these amazing ports, and life was just grand. I got literally 7 days a week. I was off in a new port. We were in a new country every day, hopping around from Spain to France to Monaco to Italy to Greece to Croatia to Malta to Tunisia to Morocco. Just you name it, we did it all. So many travel adventures. The last book is really about travel, more so than the ships.
Wow, that's so exciting. Um, okay, so someone who kind of cruises or who's into cruising would obviously be drawn to your book to some degree. What do your books hold for someone who's never heard of cruising or not at all interested in cruising? Because I think they do offer a lot. What, from your perspective, has it to offer?
Well, I think especially the third one has a tremendous amount to offer because it really is a travel memoir more so than a cruise expose or anything of that nature. The third book in particular is really a love story, and it's a true international love story. And it's about, how hard you're going to fight for something. Is it worth it? I think so, but not everybody does, right? So you can get a lot of inspiration in the third book, I think, anyway, because the challenges that faced Bianca and I were just so extreme. I mean, I'm from Nevada, she was from Romania, and, we're both working on cruise ships, but rarely the same one, and those ships are hopping around all over the world. So there's tremendous challenges, and there's cultural things that you need to overcome. She comes from a very macho society that's also a former communist nation. And, there's a radical difference of opinion on how to handle situations. And it's an inspiring story, I think. All you need is love, I guess.
Good old romantic there. Okay, I'm sure we'll cover more of that. But now I wanted to talk to you about your career path as a writer, what brought you to writing, and how you've been so tremendously successful within that. So, when did you thought, okay, I could turn something that I do as notes into something like a book? Has that always been with you as a child growing up, or is it something that you've done as an adult? How did all that work for you?
Well, I started at a very early age wanting to be a writer, and that, that's the last thing in the world my parents wanted. Dad's an engineer. I mean, he does not want, I was either going to be an artist or a writer, which is worse, I don't know. But I graduated early from high school so I could write my first book, and I spent that year, it was a half year, actually, and I wrote this awful book and sent it off to some teenagers, writing contest, and, it was terrible, of course. But that was my first effort in saying, hey, I got to put my time and effort where my dreams are. But life took over. I went to college. I started a business when I got out of college that was totally unrelated to writing. But I always wanted to be a writer, and I kept writing early in the mornings, and it was my hobby. Well, when I had my business, we had a lot of international investments. And one of the guys that I worked with was a very inspiring figure who had worked, I don't know how many countries he had worked. He worked for an auto glass company. His name is Dan Payne. And he was sent to wherever they had a factory that had problems. They're like, okay, Dan, we need you to go to Zimbabwe for 5 days and solve the problem. So he goes. While he's in Zimbabwe, they're like, okay, now you're going to Malaysia. Okay, so he goes. And he gave me some great advice. He's like, I don't remember anything. It's this big blur. So if you ever travel, Brian, make sure you take notes. Keep a diary. And, you're not going to suffer the way I did because I've got years of amazing experiences that I remember in flashbacks years later. So I made sure that I followed his advice. And when I did end up going on the cruise ships, I took notes every day. I wrote a diary, knowing that in the back of my mind, hey, this might just be my ticket into the writing world. And that's what, in fact, happened. When I finally left the ships, I spent a year not doing anything and just writing up a proposal and trying to get this thing off the ground and sell it. Fortunately, it worked.
Wow. So going back to making notes, is that one of your key pieces of advice for anyone wanting to write? Is just to make notes as often as detailed as you can?
Yes, I think a diary is very important to really appreciate life. Not just for writers, but I find that if you spend the 5 minutes at the end of the day to think about what did I do today and do I feel good about today? And if not, then what is it that didn't work and what can I do better, tomorrow? It's very important. And you get into this great habit of introspection, which so few of us have. And it's so important to happiness. Introspection, think about it. And I find myself thinking, wow, I didn't do anything but watch TV today. Well, I'm going to take pains to do something more interesting tomorrow, and it's expanded my joy of life.
Well, I think that could be your fifth book, a self-help guide to self-improvement.
I should. Those things make more money than anything, except for maybe Harry Potter.
It's all one and the same. Okay, so I know that you work hard and you're very disciplined, obviously, from everything that you've been through and just kind of the stuff that we've done. Um, how hard or how easy was it for you to keep a regular diary for all of that time with everything that was going on, especially just being so tired from working on a cruise ship? How did you do all that?
Yeah, it was tough. But I was an extremely lonely guy on the ships. And that really, I could vent into my diary because most of my notes at the time were venting, let's be honest. But, every time I did go into port, I made sure I talked about it. And at the beginning, there was still that excitement of, today we're in St. Martin. Of course, I can't get off the ship, but look, it's St. Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And that works. It just kind of propelled me along. And as things got better, I would write a little bit more and bitch a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it really was easy for me to do it because I knew that I had to do it. And it is what it is. I mean, I didn't want to waste this opportunity.
Sure. And was that literally just bullet points like this happened, or was it full sentences, full paragraphs that you did?
Well, I kind of talk to my diary, so it's kind of me saying this is what happened. So it's more than bullet points. There was no introspection on the ships. I didn't have time for that. But it was me explaining to myself what happened today.
So how did putting books one and two? Was it you did them kind of one after the other, or was it you worked and then you wrote and then you worked again and then you decided to write? How did all that play out?
I wish that I had been a full-time writer from the beginning, because each book, or the first two books, I approached differently, and in hindsight, I'm like, oh, there's so much more I could have done. But real life, I was working full-time, actually, for part of the book two, and I was part-time for part of book one. And anyway, I did not have a full-fleshed out plan for a trilogy or anything of that nature. I knew I had these books in me, but I was still new. I was feeling how it would go, and so that's why the first book kind of cuts off abruptly, because I'm like, okay, it's about me being a waiter. I was done being a waiter, and so it's kind of done. And I wish I had been able to go back and narrate it a little bit better, but that's the way it is. So the second book was kind of the same thing. It's, okay, I've got this chunk of time, me becoming an art auctioneer. It was about a 6, maybe an 8-month period. And that one has a little bit better of a story arc, beginning, middle, end. But what can I say? You get better every book. That's the moral of the story. We learn.
Absolutely. So you collected all these notes. So what actually, was there a moment or an aha moment or a point that you sat down and think, I'm going to write book one and this is how it's going to be? What was the transition from having your experiences, having the notes, and turning it into a book?
It does take a lot of brain work. I would read through, well, I would have a general idea of which sections of my career I want to talk about. And it did kind of work out that each year does make kind of a good book on its own. So I had that vague idea, and you refine it as you start reading your notes and figuring out where the big breaks are. By breaks, I mean transitions, I should say. And so it takes a lot of brain work, a lot of reading and rereading your notes. It's exhausting rereading your notes so many times, but it's necessary. And you have to shuffle things a little bit, because just because it happened in October, it works better in September, and it doesn't really matter. And so I was scared to do that in the first two books. And in the third one, I'm like, you know what, it doesn't matter. It's a nameless port. And so you learn how to groom your data a little bit more effectively to tell a better story the more you go over it and the more familiar you are with the material.
So what about simple things like, had you studied writing, like simple things like sentence structure? Because I like the way you write. It flows very nicely. It's very imaginative. You slip in bits of humour, which I'll come back to shortly. Things like that, is that something that you've had a knack for, or did you have to take a class, or is that down to your editor? How does all that work?
Well, I would like to think that I got that from Dad. My father was a copious reader, and he got me reading at a very early age. So I've always, like I said, I wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid. So you work on it and work on it and work on it. And when I was younger, I was trying to show off, and I'd use big words. You know, we all do that. And it got to the point where I found the most reception was when I'm telling stories. I'm a natural storyteller. I'm the kind of guy that likes to, when I go out, I want a quiet place where we can have a beverage and tell stories. And so I started writing using that narrative voice. And I should mention, I do other writing as well that has a completely different tone and narrative voice. That's a third-party, third-person omniscient perspective, totally different stuff. And I made the conscious decision when I'm writing about my life that I'm going to write it in this first-person narrative perspective. So it sounds like I'm in a room with you just shooting shit, as they say. And so that's where the humor comes from as well, because I try to be a funny guy if I can. I'm a pretty funny guy, I guess.
No, and absolutely, I like, because for me, it doesn't feel like you're trying to be a stand-up comedian saying this and then this happened because this is going to be funny. It's like it just slips in naturally. Is that, I'm presuming that's quite a natural quality for you, as opposed to something you have to almost devise and plan when you're putting sentences together for your books?
No, well, thank you. It comes naturally. And, before I actually write a chapter, I'll go over which notes that I'm going to write about, and I read it 2 or 3 times, and I edit copiously. And if a little joke suddenly pops into my head, I can slip it in. And the first draft never has much humor in it, right? But it's not a conscious decision. It's just I love dialogue, and a lot of people have criticized me saying, how could I possibly remember verbatim all the dialogue? The answer is, of course, I don't. But I know the kind of responses that I would say in a certain situation. And so it does come naturally. It really does. And because it has that me telling a story tone, I have a wry sense of humor. I like to slip in those little things. It comes naturally.
And do you feel that that's kind of inherent within you since ever, that kind of knack for writing and storytelling?
Yeah, I never realized it when I was younger, to be honest. But I think it's been there from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because the reason I ask is that it's just reading it, because you'll read it, and sometimes with authors, I find that although they've been highly verbose or whatever, it's hard to move from word to word to word for whatever reason. that I don't know because I'm not part of that world, but I like your books are very easy. Like even all the comments that I see, it's like I raced through your book, and I'm already at the end, and it only took a couple of days, or it was
Yeah,
really quick. I felt
yeah,
that with myself.
yeah, I get that a lot, and I think that's wonderful. In fact, not to keep bringing up the critics, but I've had a lot of people say his book isn't really 400 pages because I read it in 2 days, and I just find that hilarious. It's the style. I intentionally use small words when I can. I intentionally try to keep it light and fast and easy. And I want to tell a story. I want it to be. I don't want people to waste their time. I want them to feel that they've, gotten something good out of it. And so I try to keep it light and easy.
That's really cool. So, what would your advice be to someone who would want to be a writer and has got a rough book or a rough script together, but they don't know how to polish it? What would your advice be for them?
The most important thing, absolutely, is to have third-party people read it, and it cannot necessarily be your friends. Constructive criticism is paramount in this industry, and if you give your manuscript you've been lovingly crafting for years to your spouse or your parents, they're not going to give you the feedback you need. So you need to, you can give it to friends if you trust them to, lay it straight. But, there are readers groups, things of that nature. It's extremely important. And, if you can even go to a coffee shop where they have an open mic and read something in front of a crowd. That's a great way. Book clubs, whatever. But the point is, you must get it in front of other people you don't know. And you must listen to what they say and
Okay.
act on it.
And is that what you did? I mean, when you were putting your book together, at what point did you think, okay, this is ready to go out to someone else for a critique?
There's actually a very funny story about that. When I was writing Cruise Confidential, let me rephrase that. When I was pitching Cruise Confidential, and I had just come back from the ships, and I was contacting a bunch of agents. I was pitching to book publishers. They say it's like 90 times easier to get an agent than a publisher. Well, for me, it was the other way around. I got a response from my publisher way faster than I was ready for. All I had was a letter and about 3 pages. That was it.
Wow.
And so they're like, show us what you got. So I'm like, oh my God. So I took 3 days and I cranked out the first 60 pages of Cruise Confidential in 3 days.
Wow.
And sent it to them. And they read it in a few minutes and said, all right, where's the rest? And I'm like, well, this is great. They love it. They're like, we'd love to publish your stuff. Where is it? And I'm like, wow. So it took me, oh man, I don't remember how long it ended up taking me to write it. It was very fast, 6-8 months. And I was working part-time as well. And so in this case, I didn't have any choice but to just do my thing and throw it at them. And, of course, they edited it. But they didn't change a whole lot. They just kind of crossed the T's and dotted the I's, more or less. But I think the very narrative, casual style is conducive to that. So they didn't have to really wrangle with my verbiage too much. But, yeah, I got really lucky on that.
Wow. So this is an interesting point that you made that you should just get out there and put your work out there. Say you had put your work out there and someone said, or your friends or someone important to you had said, you know what, I don't think this book's going to go anywhere. I don't think you're that great a writer. What would your response have been, and what would you have done from there? Because I'm sure that there, like, J.K. Rowling was like some unemployed, a benefit woman or something, and I'm sure like tons of people turned her down. So,
Oh yeah,
to you, how would you take that criticism? Would you have done it anyway, or would you have said, okay, maybe it's not the best time? What would your advice be to someone?
You've got to have a thick skin in this industry. You absolutely must, and you've got to stick to your guns. I mean, if the thing about being a writer is it's a creative endeavor. You got to follow your dreams, and it's your dream, and you can't let anybody, screw you around with it. You got to stick to your guns, absolutely. And I've had plenty of people. I have horrendous critics. Oh my God! But whatever. It's hey, this is my story. You don't have to read the next book. Sorry you didn't like it. Fortunately, a lot of people do. But it hurt in the beginning when I would get these nasty critics. But the slings and arrows, you just got to take them, man.
Cool. So
actually, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
I was just going to move on. So you submitted your first few pages. Your publisher said, "Yeah, we want more." So you wrote your book in about 6 to 8 months. You said, what happened then with it actually getting out there and selling, and how did that process work?
Well, writers nowadays, the industry is changing radically. I did not have to do hardly anything to publicize this because they took it on themselves. I have I'm with a different publisher now, but my first publisher, Traveler's Tales, I love these guys. They were in that sweet spot size. They're medium publisher, so they're big enough to get things done, and they're small enough to care about each and individual project they take. So they got the publicist. They did all the stuff themselves. And nowadays, especially the big houses, but unless you're already J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, you are going to be required to do almost all of your own publicity.
Wow.
And that is just the sad reality. And a lot of authors are shocked to find out that it costs money to get a book out there nowadays. And that's because the industry is changing so much, and the traditional models are horrendously outdated. These guys are getting squeezed from every direction, so they're just pushing off all the publicity, all of it, onto these new guys, the writers.
Wow, that is crazy. After you submitted your manuscript completed, well, how long did you have to wait for it to be published in book form and ebook form?
Well, let's see. It's I don't really remember. I think it was about 4 or 5 months after I handed it in that it went to print. The ebook did not come out right away with Cruise Confidential. That was right about when the ebook thing was just starting to get some traction. And I would say a year ago, 2 years ago, is when, oh man, I can't remember when Cruise Confidential was made into the ebook, but that's when the sales really, really took off, was the ebook. I mean, it's completely revolutionizing the industry.
Wow, okay, then that's news to me. So what happened? So they released your paperback, and then how was that received? At what point did it start gaining momentum, and sales picked up, and then you started getting your recognition? How did all that play out?
It happened fairly quickly. Because my first recognition wasn't huge. You always start small and build, but they really took the book and ran with it and got a good publicist. They spent the money to get the book into airport bookstores, and that is not a cheap thing, let me tell you. And so we got a lot of exposure from that. And so that's when the request for reviews started coming, was from that work. And then they managed to get some pretty good radio spots for me as well. And so it started to build momentum fairly quickly as far as word of mouth went. And there's a website called cruisecritic.com, which has arguably the world's largest message boards. And when those guys found out about it, then it really took off.
Oh,
It's
wow.
a very fickle group on cruisecritic.com. If you're in their good graces, great, but the second they turn on you, they will sink your ship in a heartbeat. But they seem to really enjoy Cruise Confidential in the beginning. And so that's when it really took off.
Oh, wow. And was that at the same time that the ebook hit, or was that the success of the ebook completely different to
It
that?
was completely different. Yeah, they were very late on getting the ebook out. But, in 2010, I think, late 2010, maybe is when they got it out. But that's when things were really kicking into overdrive with the Amazon Kindle and the Book Nook and, of course, iBooks. And nowadays, I believe it was in 2011, Amazon sold more ebooks than traditional books, print books.
Wow.
And it's only going, boy, once they tip the scales, believe me, the ebooks are just really taking over.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing how that's panned out. What was it about the ebook that worked for you? If you see what I'm saying, was it yeah? How did the ebook support you so much, or how was that so successful that made it different from a paperback?
I think the reason the ebooks have done so well for the cruise books is because cruisers are very web savvy. They love to go online and to look for the next cruise deal. They love to talk about cruising. There's a very active online cruising community. So they're already plugged in, if you will. And of course, the vast majority of people have access to a computer, but it doesn't mean that they're living, eating, and breathing it, right?
Mm.
But if you really want to make money in the industry, you've just got to have that online presence now.
Wow. That's really because I'm just trying to think back at how I came across your book. I can't remember. All I know is that I read that because obviously Kindle sends out free chapters of first books, and yeah, no, I just totally loved it, and I just had to get the book as soon as. So when did the recognition in the form of awards and stuff come through? Because that must have been really cool.
That was really cool, and that I can also thank my first publisher, Traveler's Tales, for that. They put it in. I don't know how many awards they put it in for. I know how many it won. This is the only breakdown of communication I have ever had with my publisher, my first one. They didn't tell me I was nominated for any of these things. I found out every time from somebody else who was nominated. Unbelievable. And when I won the Benjamin Franklin Awards Book of the Year, Humor Book of the Year, I got an email from one of the other finalists, and he's like, "Congratulations, dude." I'm like, "Oh, okay, for what?" And it's because the physical award actually goes to the publisher for them, and they didn't even tell me, man. So what's up with them?
Why was
But
that?
my
Was that?
new publisher, I'm working with a group called. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. Why didn't they tell you? Was it kind of to not get your hopes up, or was it just a mismanagement thing?
I have no idea. I have no idea whatsoever. I'm sure that it just slipped through the cracks. These are busy guys. Now I made sure with my second publisher, World Waters, I'm like, you keep me in the loop, man. And they've been fantastic. And Ship for Brains, which was the first book that I went with World Waters, has already won or been like a finalist for like 3 or 4 awards. It's got 3 more coming up that I think I've got a really good shot for. It's unbelievable. It's been just very, pardon the expression, rewarding.
Now I don't know anything about book awards. How does it work? I mean, obviously you said you have to be in it to win it, so that answers a huge thing.
They always have a panel, invariably, and the size of the panel can vary. But what they're looking for is usually the content though some of them actually will take the whole package into consideration. For example, the Benjamin Franklin Awards, they look at the whole package because they're sponsored by a small business or a small publishers consortium. So they want to make sure that there are quality books being produced, not just the content, but also that they look good, and they're packaged properly and they have good design.
Wow.
But not everyone cares about such things. Sometimes they just want to make sure that it's a well-written story. Every single contest will tell you what exactly they're looking for.
Wow. And what was the impact of winning the awards? Did it boost sales or your reputation? How has it all been since?
It depends on the contest. Some of them are kind of low key. The Forward Awards that I won in 2009 was held at the Book Expo America, which is one of the largest book expos in the world.
Wow.
And so I got a lot of attention because of that. Whereas some of the other ones, like the New England Book Festival, is actually really low key, and it's in this really nice hotel that's really premium stuff in Boston, but it's just kind of a super exclusive thing. So that one's more of a feather in your cap than anything else.
Wow, that is so cool. And how were the ceremonies like? Is it really grand, or is it how is it like to be nominated and be with your fellow
Well, the
contestants?
ceremonies are, like I said, it varies all over the place. And the nominations, you get an email and you can react as you see fit. I tend to light up a cigar myself.
Wow, that is so cool. And do you have contact with your competitors, or is it very everyone's on their own and you don't really mix that much?
To date, I have not mixed a whole lot, but there's no reason not to. I've been very busy lately, but one of the things I really enjoyed about the first book, Cruise Confidential, was being contacted by these other guys, men and women that were nominated, or of course, I was appreciated the fact that they told me I won. But no, we all help each other. We all understand what it's like to be a writer. We're a minority, so we all want to help each other out with moral support and tips of the trade and things like that. It's very rewarding.
Wow, that's so cool. Because book awards is not something that, or it's not something that you come across that often. So it's quite interesting for me just to hear how all that pans out.
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot of them that the average public is aware of.
Hmm. With the awards, is it something that you would recommend?
You broke up there. Can you say that again, Nick?
With the awards and stuff, is it something that you would recommend an author pushing for, either to write a book for an award or something to keep in their mind, or is it just like it's a nice thing if it happens, but I wouldn't put too much on it?
It's a little bit of it's a nice thing that happens, but I think it's very important for authors to have that self-confidence that winning an award will give you. And if you're market and publicity savvy, you can also use it to your advantage. Because every time you win an award, I mean, that right there is a new newsletter ready to go out, right?
That is so cool. So you had the success of the first book and it won the awards. What made you think, okay, it's time for book 2 now?
I always wanted to write a book 2. There's so much to tell. The story just, wow. I was living the dream for 4 years, and that first year was the worst of it, that's for sure. And I wouldn't call it living the dream that first year, but there was just so many adventures, so many things that happened that people, wouldn't even believe if they didn't see it, or, I wanted to share all that. And, of course, I had a lot of people asking what happened with Bianca, So I wanted to tell the story, but it was so long, I couldn't even cover it in the second book either. That's why the third book was about all things Bianca. But I always knew that my years at Sydney absolutely must be written about.
Wow. And would that have gone if, say, book 1 released and no one bought it and it bombed, would you still have felt, you know what, I don't care, I have to just write it, it's who I am, it's what I do, I just have to get it out there regardless of what happens?
I would have definitely continued. If the first book had absolutely tanked, I would not have worked on the sequel immediately, because you have to look at it as a business. And if you have a product that's not selling, you don't want to make more of it. But I would have come back to it at a later time and try to fix it, tinker with it, see what I needed to do to make it fly.
Mm. From an outsider's point of view, it sounds like you've had quite a nice journey author-wise. What have been your hardest challenges that you have faced, or you continue to face as a writer, getting it out there? What are the challenges that you face, and how do you personally deal with them, if you have any?
Sure. There's really only one thing that has been a recurring challenge for me, and in the beginning, it almost derailed me. And when you're a writer, the money comes in, it fits and starts. You're going to get a little bit here, a big chunk there, a little bit there, and you cannot rely on when it comes in, and you don't know how much it will be. So it's very, very difficult to live your life. That's why all writers in the beginning have other jobs for years and years. I know of one writer who had 7 books on the New York Times bestseller list, and he still had a part-time job.
Wow.
Now, in his case, he was writing Star Wars novels, so I have a hunch that the trademark guys took a big chunk of his profits. But still, that's really the hard part, and it's always a challenge. And when I made the decision to go full-time as a writer, there's no question that I'm subsidized on a monthly basis by my wife at having a full-time job, because I will have months I'm like, wow, that was half as much as last month or less. You just never know. And some months are really big for books, some months are not, or some months are really big for new releases that take everybody's attention, and you don't get any attention at all.
Wow. So your advice to someone who's looking to kind of get out there is just keep it on the side, have some other form of income to balance it out, and eventually, hopefully, it'll sell.
Yes, you must keep your day job. You must look at this as a business. And, we have so many visions floating around in our head about how it works being a writer. And it comes from movies and TV and what we read, and it's all complete crap. Okay? It's nothing to do with the reality. So you've got to look at it as a business, and any business that has such a unreliable source of income, you can't count on it. So you've got to have a steady revenue stream. So if that means that you want to be a waiter or a waitress on the side, whatever it takes, man. But don't give up the dream, but make sure you put it in its proper context.
Wow. And how how the 3 sales of your book work? Is it a boost of one, or has one kind of stopped selling as you've done 2 and 3, or are they all selling at the same time or equally? How's things panned out the more books you push out there?
Well, that's the beauty of having a serial. If one of them does well, the other ones take a boost as well. And for example, when book 1, was it last October, when it hit the national bestseller charts, I have a completely different publisher for book 2, but I saw a huge spike in sales for that, of course. So hopefully something like that will happen again, and all 3 of them will see a spike. It compounds. It's compound interest, which, as we all know, Einstein said is the most powerful force in the universe.
And do you mind me asking why you switched publisher? Or is that a private matter?
No, it's not a private matter. I like Traveler's Tales very much. I think these guys are fantastic. But when I chose to switch, it happened to coincide with the recession. And, it's easy to forget just how brutal the recession was back in 2008, 2009-ish. And it looked like Traveler's Tales wasn't going to make it.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to, and I don't remember the numbers, but let's just say that a frightening percentage of small and medium publishing houses went under. Just huge amount. And they managed to, come roaring back to life. And I'm so happy for them. But in the meantime, I found another publisher, and we're doing great. So I have no reason to go back.
And speaking, presumably it was easier to get this publisher because you had that history, or was it kind of like approaching a new publisher off scratch?
It was easier. There's no question about it. Your publishers get probably 1,000 emails and calls a day from wannabe writers. So when they know that you're already published, and they know that you've already won some awards, and they know that you've already been on this radio show or whatever, they'll give you the 2 minutes. They'll let you give them the pitch.
And just going back, because I think, especially in the creative industry, a lot of people are hit with self-doubt. I mean, I know it was quite a relatively smooth journey, or it sounds like it was, but say what did you reach for when you were writing the first book that made you think, okay, I have to do it, or if no one likes it, what keeps you going? What do you reach for? What self-belief or confidence or positive talk, or how do you go about keeping confident, especially when you're starting out in those early days?
Well, that's an excellent question. When I was starting out, I did have the benefit of having been perfecting my craft for many, many, many years. That doesn't mean that it had been published, but it had been seen by other people, for many years. And I already had a very strong sense of what I'm good at because of the business that I had. I was a graphic designer for about 3 years. And based on the strength of my graphic design, we managed to get international funding, and entirely, actually, because of that. Mm-hmm. And so I know what I'm good at. And so I take great efforts to stay at what I'm good at. That narrow little beam of what I'm good at, I'm not leaving it, baby. That's where I'm going to stay. So the writing was, it's all part of the same family. I think being a writer and an artist, the creative thing, it's just different tools, really. But the creative impulse, I already had confidence in my ability is what I'm trying to say. And, applying it with a different tool, it's just a matter of a learning curve. Okay, get over it. Let's do this thing. Yeah. I'm a naturally very optimistic guy anyway, though. I mean,
that I know you mentioned that a few times. Because, I think, not to get too stereotypical, but I have read in a lot of these articles that women tend to have no matter how successful they are, they just wake up and think, oh my God, I'm a fraud, I'm going to be discovered at how crap I am.
I have heard that.
But do you ever experience that and think, oh dear God, am I really that great an author? Or is it like, you know what, I'm good, whatever?
Well, I'm an arrogant bastard, so I don't have these issues anymore. I had them the same as everybody else when I was younger, but I kind of been through fire, man. The ships were so tough, and having made a really good go of the business in the computer world with the graphic design stuff, I've been around enough, and I learned from people who had been around way more than me. And as arrogant as I am when it comes to my creativity, I'm very humble about everything else. And I don't know, the blend seems to work for me. I don't get too cocky because I know that my sense of business is, horrible. And I'm well aware of my failings and my weaknesses, so I don't let that creep into my strengths. I know how to keep them apart. But no, I don't wake up at night and think, oh man, I'm fooling myself.
That's good. I like what you said, because it is kind of like it takes 20 years to make an overnight success. Like you've been at it, you know what you're doing, you've been in the game long enough to say this is what works and this or doesn't. So moving on from book 2, and that had been excellently received. How did part 3 pan out? Because I know that I think you said that you made more of a switch to a full-time writer. So how did the day-to-day writing switch from having notes and having to do bits and pieces and write to go from writing full time. How was that switch for you? Was it an easy thing to do?
It was very easy to do. It's what I had always dreamed of, was being a full-time writer. And, you're spending years using it as a hobby, and all you want to do is get more free time at the end of the day for my hobby. So finally, your hobby is your job. And the biggest transitional issue for that was suddenly I need a new hobby, right? I mean, I'm spending all day doing this, and what do I do for recreation now? Because you've got to pull back at some point. You've got to. And, everything that I used to do to free up, was writing or the creative stuff, and now I'm burnt out of that. So I really didn't want to, turn on the television or anything like that, so I needed to get some new hobbies. It was a complete restructuring of my day, my daily routine, but it's all good. And because I was in control, I just had to plan it and do it.
So what's a typical day in the life of a writer, or your life? What time would you wake up, and how long would you spend writing, and how would that pan out?
Well, that varies radically, I'm sure, from individual to individual. In my case, I am very much a morning person. And it's ironic because the last job that I had, which I will be writing about someday, I was a blackjack dealer on the Las Vegas Strip.
Yeah, no, I remember when I was listening to our interview in December, you mentioned that. I was like, oh, that'd be well cool. What casino was that? Just that, were you allowed to say?
I'm not going to say. I'm going to keep that mum. But it was right on the Strip.
Oh, wow.
But so it was, it was owned by Harrah's, which is now called Caesars, which is the world's largest gambling conglomerate. They own half the Strip. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I went to work from 8 p.m. till 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Which is very much not my style. And within 2 weeks, I was waking up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and writing. So I'm naturally a morning person. The second the sun comes up, I'm ready to go. And I'll get 3 or 4 hours of writing in the morning, and then I'll just take a break and kind of pick at it later that afternoon and in the early evening, waiting for my wife to get home. So pretty much in those first 3 or 4 hours, I get 80% of my day's work done, because it's all about quality, not quantity.
And how much? I mean, obviously it varies from day to day and week to week, but how have you found it kind of block size? Is it like a couple of pages a day, or maybe half a page a day, or how does that kind of?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's very important. You must set goals, and my goal is 1,000 words a day.
Wow.
So that's like 3 or 4 pages, and it's okay if you have a bad day. We all have a bad day. Just make it up the next day. Not a big deal, But you've got to average 1,000 words a day, for at least I do.
Oh, that's cool. So set yourself a goal and do your best to meet that, whatever it is. And how has your friends and family and your wife? Do you turn to them for emotional support if writing gets too much, or are you pretty self-sufficient?
I'm very self-sufficient about this sort of thing, actually. I mean, we all need moral support, but my wife is very patient because I use her ear a lot. I talk and talk and talk, telling her about what I want to write tomorrow or what I need to do, and she's not listening. That's fine. She doesn't need to listen. I need to be saying it out loud, and because that's how I compartmentalize it and make the plan, So she provides support in that manner.
Cool. So now you've just released book 3. What happens in the weeks and months to come? Is it just sit back, work on your next project, or is it push this one out? Any appearance? How does that all work out for you now?
Yeah, it's I planned to take a couple of months off, but that doesn't seem to be happening, actually. There's a lot of publicity that my publisher is asking me to do that I'm thrilled to do. So I'm trying to reach a much broader audience with this book, Unsinkable, Mr. Brown, and we're trying to tap into genres that I've never tapped into, like romance, for example. So we're brainstorming a lot. We're working together a lot. So I think I'm going to take the whole summer and really work on promotion for this book. Plus, I know that book 2, Ship for Brains, is up for a lot of big awards in May and June.
Oh, wow.
So I think what we're going to be doing is having a big grand relaunch of book 3, probably in July. So that way we can capitalize on all these new awards that hopefully I'm going to win. And, you know, I think we're going to be coming out with the deluxe set, I guess you could say, in July. But that's what we're working on. I will be working on book 4, but probably not till, I would like to say fall, but in Las Vegas, fall is a very ambiguous term. So I'll say September, October.
Wow. And you say your publisher what would promotion consist of? Is that just interviews, or how does it work?
Yeah, we haven't decided, to be honest. We were in such a rush to get the book out for the Titanic anniversary that we don't have anything lined up. We didn't have enough time to do everything. I just got off a big radio tour. 2 months, I don't remember how many dozens of radio calls I did, and I'm exhausted of talking on the radio. But I'd have to get up at literally 4:30 in the morning, or but stay up late the night, previous night. And radio tours are exhausting, man. It's from the comfort of my own home, and yet it's working out. But I don't know if we're going to do another one of those or not. Probably, but we'll see. I don't know. It's whatever they come up with.
Wow, that is so crazy busy. So when you're looking back, what are your kind of top tips for becoming a writer or becoming successful or staying motivated? If you could sum it up in a couple of handy hints that you've lived by, what would they be?
Sure, that's actually the perfect way to finish this set out. The thing about being a writer is it is about your dream, and you must pursue it vigilantly and aggressively, and you can't let anybody bring you down, because everybody will try to do so. You are going to find so many roadblocks to this industry. Now, it's true that the ebook revolution is changing everything. So really the big thing is, A, chase your dream, and B, you got to define your dream before you can chase it. Because is your goal just to get a book out? Because if that's the case, with the ebook revolution, anybody can do it. Anybody can get it out there, and you don't even have to have it edited, and it can just be on Amazon Kindle selling for $2. Anybody can do that. So go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm disagreeing.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really, you must define your dream before you can chase it.
Wow, that's so cool. So tell us about your cruise next year, your book signing cruise. How's that going to work, and where is it to? Yeah,
the book signing cruise is going to be in February. It's going to be over the President's Day weekend in February. I guess you don't really know which weekend that is.
Yeah, no.
It's in the middle of February, and it's a long weekend here in the States. And where is my data? You'd think I'd have it all in front of me. It's on the Norwegian Epic. It's departing from Miami on February 16th in 2013. So it's a 7-day cruise. The Norwegian Epic is a huge, 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 huge ship. It's one of the big bruisers. Wow. So it's got 3 ports. I think it can only go into the super big, ultra-modern ports because the ship's got 5,000 passengers.
Wow, yeah, no, I saw it on Undercover Boss the other week, and I've never really paid attention to NCL, but it looks gorgeous. It looks absolutely phenomenal.
It looks amazing inside, man. I mean, it's a city, floating city. They all are, but... So, yeah, it's really exciting. Pat Schultes is my travel agent that's arranging that, and of course, if you're interested in that, you can just go to brianbrunscruise.com or on my website, of course. But it's going to be fun. This is my first ever book signing cruise. So, of course, not all 5,000 passengers are going to be there for me, unfortunately.
You never know.
But, yeah, you never know.
Great place to get it out there.
Exciting.
So what's going to happen on the cruise? How much time are they going to spend with you, or how's it all going to pan out?
Well, we haven't worked out the itinerary yet, but I plan on being readily available. I mean, it's all about connecting with the fans, right? So there's obviously going to be a Q&A. There's going to be book signing sessions. But most of the time, I'm probably going to be hanging out in the lounges or the restaurants and just hanging out with groups of people, maybe even doing some of the excursions. My wife's going to be there, so
I
might sneak off to do a few excursions just with her, of course. But, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do, but there's going to be a lot of guest interaction because that's what it's all about.
Wow, that is so cool. Okay, I think that's pretty much me done. Is there anything you wanted to end on, or anything you wanted to cover at all, or?
No, this has been great. It's so easy to talk to you, Nick. We just go on and on and on.
No, I love talking to you. It's so great. Well, good luck with everything. I hope book 3's a smash. Is the TV series or film something that you're gonna pursue, or is it just if it happens, it happens? If not,
I wish. Yeah, I mean it's out of my hands. These are things that the publishers handle, and you never know. It's these things in the Hollywood world. You get something that's on the front burner, and then it's going hot and heavy. It looks like it's going to work, and then it doesn't, so it's on the back burner. But it doesn't mean that it's shelved somewhere forever. So you never know. These things can resurrect. So I'm crossing my fingers.
That'd be so cool. What would your part be if you could choose? Would you be acting in it, or would you be a producer, or write? Like, what would in a dream?
Oh, I would have no role in it whatsoever. Unfortunately, they would just take my stuff and adapt it to make a teleplay. But I would love to be able to have a cameo or something. That would be fantastic. But I'm pushing 40 now, and it was 10 years ago when I was doing this stuff.
Wow.
And considering the stories it's the booze and the sex, I'm sure they're going to want to get some young hot guy, right? So I can't do that anymore.
Wow, but you're still doing like your marathons and your Spartan this and Spartan that and stuff, is it?
Yeah, I do a lot of hardcore stuff. Yeah, I try to stay tough, and trim. That's for sure. And I plan on writing about some of these things, as well. But yeah, that still doesn't mean I've got the receding hairline,
That's so cool. So writing is pretty much what at least for the foreseeable future, you're going to continue that route and just keep writing full time.
I'm going to do this until it quits.
Wow.
Until it quits on me. Hopefully, it never will.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having the patience and determination to stick this out and come here later. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best and keep us updated with all your adventures. And I'm sure you're going to go to magnificent levels with all of this. And I think a TV show and or film is coming. Yeah, it just has to.
I hope. Thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
All the best. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.